and welcome to Two Words Wolves Pod. I'm Ryan Eichten, and the Timberwolves have made a move. The offseason is upon us, and it's a fairly sizable one. The Timberwolves have more or less salary dumped Julius Randle, everyone's favorite Timberwolf, to the Brooklyn Nets. They send out their number 28th pick, with a third to last pick in the first round, and they get back nothing other than salary relief and Brooklyn's number 33 pick. To break it all down, with me is Andrew Carlson. Andrew, how you doing?
Later than I should be, probably. But hey, man, that's how the offseason works when these things go down. I also think maybe the most valuable piece of that trade is the $33 million trade exception that the Wolves got. So, we can go from there. But that might be the most valuable asset that's part of that trade. Maybe pick 28. You can make the argument. Maybe pick 33. But we ask Tim Connolly. I think maybe having $33 million of relief in a trade might be number one.
Maybe the most important aspect of the trade is Mo Gay. As I'm saying that, there goes Mo Gay, who they will be declining his club option on that one,
legend,
which is
Mo Gay. It'll be a trivia question one day.
Yeah, it's not as much as Twins legend Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who was on their roster for a couple days in the middle of trades. Kind of Luke Ridenour type of, if you remember from one deadline, Luke Ridenour got traded like 5 different times.
That's a Twins deep cut. Only the sickos are in on, Ryan.
Yeah, if you remember the IKF Twins era, that's you're with me on that one. But yeah, let's get back on track here, talking to myself as much as you. So the Wolves salary dump Julius Randle, and there's a lot that goes into this trade, and I think, like, kind of off the top, as much as we want to come on here and do our shows and kind of give hot takes or whatever, I think this will be a trade that we need some time to, at least this offseason, to really look back on and decide whether it was worth it. So first, before we break down Julius Randle's 2 years in Minnesota, let me start with kind of the financial implications of this trade, because that's, for better or for worse, that's where the value is for the Wolves, is creating a bunch of salary flexibility. So by trading Julius Randle and not taking any salary back, like you mentioned, they generate a $33 million trade exception. So what that means is, usually you have to take back similar amount of money that you send out in a trade. It's usually 125%. If you are above an apron, it's 110%. Regardless, in general, you have to send similar amounts of money back. Well, this trade exception gives you an exception to that. The Wolves could now theoretically take back $33 million of more salary back in a trade than they send out. This trade, due to some rules, can't be officially finalized until July 6th. So what that means is, I believe they could, if they do add a bunch of salary, I think they could staple that to this trade. I believe, like, if you were to just trade for, I'm just picking out a guy, I believe Trey Murphy makes like $32 million. So I believe you could, if you were to trade for Trey Murphy, you could staple that onto this trade. But regardless, that will be the Wolves' main way of adding Randle's salary back on the roster, is through a trade exception. What this also does is the Wolves are now below the luxury tax, and they're below the salary cap. So what they now have access to is the full mid-level exception, which starts at about $15 million a year, and you can give annual raises on that. So the Wolves now, and that's on top of what it sounds like is they're going to re-sign Ayo Dosunmu, maybe by the time you're listening to this, but certainly Ayo Dosunmu will likely be signed to my guess would be a slightly above the mid-level exception rate, but they can now re-sign Ayo. They can use the mid-level exception. They can use the biannual exception to sign a player $5.5 million starting salary. And they also have, like, Jalen Clark. They have Mike Conley. They have Bones Hyland, Kyle Anderson. They have all these. The guys that were on the roster last year, they do not need to use any of these exceptions to sign. If they want to sign a free agent or make a trade that brings in more salary, they would do that. That's all the boring part. But if you go look at my X account, I have the as of Monday night what the Wolves salary cap looks like. And the one number on that I want to highlight is the Wolves are currently about 50 million below the first apron. And that is coming into the offseason, I think we would have told you the second apron space would have been the number that we'd look at for what the Wolves can play around with. And maybe I'm missing something in that, but what all these exceptions I laid out do, you cannot use these exceptions and go over the first apron. So what this means for the Wolves is there's really, I don't see how they could add enough salary and not use these exceptions. So basically, the Wolves are going to be hard capped at the first apron, which is fine. There's only a $12 million or $13 million difference between those two numbers. So that's not a huge deal. But in general, the Wolves have almost just a crazy number of ways to add salaries via trade, via signings. And they have about $50 million to play with. Whether that's all worth it, I guess will be the question. But certainly Julius Randle's time, I think, seemed to have run out in Minnesota. But I guess before we dive into the actual basketball of it all, Andrew, any thoughts on I completely understand the nerdy ass spreadsheet work that unfortunately is the headliner with this trade.
No, look, I leave all of that stuff to you. I have absolutely,
That's what everyone said.
I couldn't do that if I tried. Just a couple quick thoughts though, based on a couple of things that you said. First thing of talking about that, we're not going to know the fruits of this trade until probably a year or 2 years down the road. I do want to beat the dead horse that has been brought up on Wolves Twitter over the last couple of years in saying now this is really going to be the time where we understand what this cat trade is going to come out to bear for the Wolves. Naz Reid is now your starting four. You traded Karl-Anthony Towns for the main reason of being able to keep Naz Reid and a couple other players on the roster. But the main reason was to keep Naz Reid and Julius Randle's salary slot now, whatever they end up doing with that. And Ayo Dosunmu too. Ayo Dosunmu is not a member of this roster if the cat trade doesn't happen. So whatever happens now with ensuing moves that could possibly play with this trade exception, who possibly takes that Julius Randle salary slot or something very similar, you now have 3 players that are going to be locked into this roster that you essentially traded Karl-Anthony Towns for. And how do they fit around Anthony Edwards this coming season? We will see. But this is where that I think it was kind of a honeymoon period in year 1 with the Western Conference Finals appearance. This past season, obviously didn't go that way. Third time's the charm, season 3 here. I think we're really going to get a picture of what the Wolves traded for when they got rid of Karl-Anthony Towns, because none of this would happen if he was still on the roster. The second thing is Rudy Gobert. Don't think he's going anywhere anymore. The idea of, hey, maybe there's a trade out there if Rudy goes, who knows? He might get traded here in the next 10 minutes while I'm talking. But I think part B of Naz becoming your starting 4 now is to see what this Naz Rudy combination looks like in a bigger sample size. What does a true spacing 4 look like with Rudy Gobert? The second question of that becomes, what's your rotation big that you add into the fold now, off the bench, that's going to provide some relief in that area. But the idea of Rudy Gobert now maybe going somewhere else, I think I would have put it at around 50% heading into today. I'd probably put that below 30% now. I think it's far less likely that we see him in another uniform next year.
Yeah, you may be right. And I'll read a tweet Krasinski put out here, and he obviously has sources inside the organization and does obviously a good job covering the Wolves. JK tweets out, Naz Reid is going to be the starting power forward for the Minnesota Timberwolves for the first time in his career. This move is a big statement of belief in Reid and Jaden McDaniels to take the next steps in their development. And that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, even almost regardless of Rudy, this opens the door for Naz to start at power forward. And that's been a pairing. Naz Reid and Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert has been a pairing that has worked very well when they've gotten chances to play minutes together. honestly, I mean, like in the regular season, Gobert and Randle was a fine enough pairing too. Like the numbers were good, but like Nas making $10 million less than Randle, and probably the idea I would imagine would be to get a similar level of production out of him. Makes a lot of sense to make this move. And it just always, I think the biggest thing with Julius is it was less about the mental stuff, clearly, especially down the stretch of that San Antonio series, was just something that was untenable. But all in all, I think Julius Randle kind of gave you exactly what you'd expect from him, and they will need to find replacements for his playmaking, for just his scoring load, and some of that, like Krasinski brought up, will be brought up by Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels. But ultimately, like, you traded, what did Randle's average scoring this year? 18 points a game.
Well, you need someone in your ensuing moves to be able to take some
21
defensive relief from Jaden McDaniels too. I mean, I don't think you're now expecting Jaden McDaniels to essentially become a 20-point a game scorer or close to. I would say in that territory. That is the type of player you are now expecting him to be. And I don't think that he can currently do that given the defensive load that he would be slated to take on within this current roster construct. So that Trey Murphy thing, like that could be pretty interesting. Some of those wing options, like they maybe make some sense, like the Derek White thing. What does that look like here? I don't know if that becomes less likely now if Rudy stays. The Dejounte Murray's a name that's been, I tweeted about Dejounte Murray almost right after the season, but more so in the context of trading Julius Randle. He's a name that's been kind of thrown out there now with this trade exception room that's been freed up. So I think there's some options there of kind of rangy players that can maybe give Jaden some relief, make the Wolves a little bit more of an option, but ultimately right now, like there's so much up in the air and there's so many moving pieces to what could possibly be. And you're making faces over there too, and I don't know while I'm talking if there's something that's even bigger going on, but
no, I mean. Krasinski just tweeted out that they have not been in the John Morant mix, so John Morant is not their plan to go forward. The other thought I had while you were talking, just to finish up the spreadsheet talk, the Wolves are now $43 million under their luxury tax, and look, I've heard whispers that the ownership is fairly cheap. They have roster-wise that hasn't really come to fruition yet, so we'll give them the benefit of the doubt there. Could they look to stay under the luxury tax this year? That is not what Tim Connolly indicated when we talked to him at the end of the Spurs series. But just they're $43 million under the luxury tax. They could still add a lot of talent and stay under the luxury tax. And there's a whole repeater thing that they could try to duck, but that's a conversation for another day. My bigger picture thought with this Randle trade now is, I think a lot of people, rightly so, focus on the depth of this league. Like, you need depth in this league to compete at highest levels. I mean, even like there's different forms of depth. Like the Knicks did have depth, but it was largely like their starting five was just extraordinarily well, and you could play those guys a ton of minutes, and you only needed 5.5 or a bench and a half guy after that. But so I think you can gain value by sending Julius Randle into cap space, and like they'll have no problem replacing that $33 million in the form of multiple different players. But my bigger picture thing is, like, you're still going to be missing that second. This doesn't answer and makes it worse. Like, this, who is the second star next to Ant? And maybe they believe that's Jaden or Nas. Fair enough, I guess. But you turn, basically you've taken an all NBA player level of Cat, and you traded him for salary relief, and we don't need to fully relitigate that trade. Nas is not on this roster if you don't trade Cat. Maybe that, last podcast I talked about that, so I honestly don't want to relate it. But the fact was, you turned Cat into a slightly less good player in Dante and the pick that eventually become Berenger. And now you've turned Julius Randle, who is a borderline all-star player, and what it seems like is going to be some combination of not kind of Ayo Dosunmu, but not really. They had paths to re-sign Ayo before this, but like a mid-level exception player, maybe someone else on a trade exception, all that. But you're still, to me, missing like a true like second banana. And I know this is like reductive. I know this is like, but I fully believe like you do need, unless you have like one of like Jokic, like Wemby, like I don't know, unless you have that guy, and Anthony, maybe Ant can get there eventually, but like you need like a second person that can either make the All-Star team or could like be a facsimile of that. And while I'm not gonna, Julius Randle wasn't that for the Wolves, so in that sense, losing him is not an issue. But I just think more globally, they need to find that level of player. And I guess this, and maybe that's just like not a conversation for this trade. So, but I do you kind of see what I'm saying? Is like there's still that's the biggest roster hole.
Yes, but completely agree. But that is where I struggle a little bit though, because I know we were talking about this in the media room after during the Spurs series. I made the argument at that point in time that I think that it's time to try and see what you have with Jaden McDaniels in that situation. I'll play devil's advocate here, but I do actually truly believe this is like, the San Antonio Spurs made a move for De'Aaron Fox to make him be that second banana to Wemby. And that, as of right now, doesn't maybe seem to be what the plan is going to end up being in San Antonio in the next 2, 3, 4 years. It's kind of one of those things that you maybe need to find on one of those smaller contracts in order to have a team that really works and can compete at the highest level. Like even with New York, you could make the argument that Cat was a second banana, but for a lot of that finals, I would make the argument OG Anunoby was like the second banana there for like all 5 games that happened. Like if you were to look from a start to finish series, and even Jalen Brunson wasn't even like himself for some of that. So it's like the idea of like the second star. Yes, I agree. Like I just struggle with the definition of that. You know what I mean? Like I think you need a guy, yes, to play at that level. I think they're making that bet on Jaden McDaniels being that guy. I think that's a good bet, if I'm going to be honest. I do genuinely believe that he is at a point where you need to see if he's that guy. And he showed glimpses of it in the Denver series. My big worry is the Nas thing, if I'm going to be honest. That's where I become a little bit more hesitant with things. Is he ready to be an NBA starting power forward? I could go either way. For the intents of this conversation, I don't think so. I really don't. I see a lot of inconsistencies. And I think Nas is a really good player. Like when he's on, there's just not a lot of better shooters in the league, if I'm going to be honest, from a quick trigger standpoint to a quick set of your feet. But I don't know if he's ready to assume that mantle yet. And it's a big bet to take heading into this year, in a year where you can maybe take like a half step backwards, but not really at the same time. Like you can't have that much worse of a regular season than you did last year. So I have more hesitations on that front, but I think making a worthwhile bet on Jaden McDaniels to be your number 2 while also bringing in a couple guys who are quality players. I mean, like you said, there is room here to add quality to this team. And you could make the argument at the end of the season that Julius Randle was being actively reductive from that goal.
Yeah, I'm kind of I don't think this trade solves all their issues, but I don't think it was trying to. And I think there's kind of a path to take here, which is and it's a path we all kind of wanted, was you retool this roster around what works and kind of get rid of what, I'm not going to say doesn't work, but like wasn't filling the potential of what like their salary slot could be. And I know this is like maybe you take a quote unquote gap year, and that doesn't mean that like you're going to be worse next year. I just think it means like you go into the season where like we know we're not competing for the title, but we think we can be better than last year. We think we can win another playoff series. We think we can get back to the West Finals, and maybe if things go right and we get this deadline, I don't know. Like basically you liquidate Julius Randle via exceptions and all that into a bunch of quality players, and then when a star pops up or when another trade pops up that makes sense for you to go, you'll have all these salaries. You'll have Berenger that has more playing time and will have more value. If you're really going star hunting, you'll have Jaden and Nas playing in roles that make more sense for them, and they have more value. And I think to really go on the Cat trade was, to me, the Cat trade was as big of a bet on like Naz Reid as it was on Randall himself and DiVincenzo, who's still on this roster. And obviously they couldn't have known that they were going to get Berenger, but now in retrospect, like Berenger is a big part of this. And so now this really allows Naz to start at the 4, to be their starting power forward, something he's one of 6. He won't be on your 6 man of the year list anymore, because like he's going to be starting from opening night. This gives him and Jaden really, like, those will be like your assuming the roster is assuming like the rest of the roster is fairly similar, like those are going to be your second and third offensive options, night in and night out. And we'll see if it works. I think it'd be fair to have optimism that it will, but if it doesn't, like you need to learn that. You need to learn, like, okay, Jaden is not ready to be this level of player. Naz is not ready to be this level. And again, I there's fair reason, and I probably share it, to be optimistic that these guys can be that. But like Randall was clearly standing in the way of that.
Yes.
And that, to be fair to him, I'm not even sure that was 100% his fault.
No, not even a little bit. I think you're spot on with that.
From like a title contention standpoint, it was like they needed more from Randall to beat the Spurs, to beat OKC last year, and they didn't get it. But like from a big picture sense, like I think all of us, like Randall going out of the town, not speaking to the media, like I think he did get in some ways a raw deal, and I would expect him to have a fairly solid season in Brooklyn, and certainly like Brooklyn will not, I don't think Brooklyn will have any issues avoiding the quote unquote relegation zone. Like I think Julius Randle by himself will drag that team close enough to mediocrity, which is probably what the Nets will be looking for.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. Ultimately, with the Cat trade is what I look at is, if you have to talk about one side or the other winning it, yes, the Knicks won. They won the title. We talked about that off mic. But at the end of the day, both teams are in a worse situation if that trade is not made. I do. I just firmly believe that. I think the Wolves are more cap-strung with a player that is really good. Trust me, is really good. But just if you were to take him by himself and eradicate some of the depth around him, I don't think is good enough as a 1 and 2 with Ant to take the Wolves to a title. I think the Knicks, they're missing a big man, and they're pretty directionless, and they're trotting out Mitchell Robinson and getting hacked left and right, and it's a disaster in New York, and they have still an expensive roster and not really many answers. So I feel like that's important to level set, and especially like within the context of this trade, something that we just maybe need to talk about, or maybe just keep on the burner a little bit more. My other thing, Ryan, is like, to Anthony Edwards, like, you got what you want now, man. Like, not saying that like he was pounding the table to get Julius Randle out of town or anything like that. Like, Ant's not that player, but like Naz and Jaden are I would say his 2 best friends on the team. I think it's probably fair to say that. I know Naz and Jaden are our best friends. They do a lot together. And if you're talking about 3-man groups that have probably the best chemistry on the team, on and off the court, it's Ant, Naz, and Jaden. It just is. And so now what you're saying is, again, you're going to add some pieces here, but you're saying, all right, Ant, like, you're rolling out there with your 2 buddies in the starting lineup next year, and we're going to put some quality around you. Like, we are going to be legitimately still an 8 or 9 deep team, depending on who we add here. We're going to give you wing help. We might give you some ball handling help. You still have a premier defensive center in Rudy Gobert. Like, there's players around you 3. You've got it now. Like, you don't have Julius Randle doing his black hole of sadness act on offense anymore, or like going through his kind of mood swings in the locker room and bringing the temperature of the team up and down, and and doing that sort of thing. So, I mean, now it's kind of up to you guys. Like the success of this franchise rests on those three homegrown players on this team who have been here now for what's going to be 6 years. And so, I mean, you look at that, and that's, yes, you accomplished getting rid of Julius, which it seemed like there was maybe no market for him. But also, too, you're now empowering your three homegrown guys who, let's be honest, the fan base has been pounding the table all along, too, for it to be their team. So I just think that might be something else to bring in. And also, finally, too, with the trade exception, I really do think this opens up the door. There's something there for the Wolves to latch on to a multi-team trade. I think that with Julius Randle on the roster, there was always going to be a niche group of teams that were going to take him in. I think that was just how that was going to be. And if you got yourself in a situation where you were taking on a player who was matching Julius Randle's salary, not every team would want to take him back. And so now what this frees up the Wolves to do is, instead of finding yet another team to take on Julius Randle or send him out to another team who may be begrudging to take him in a multi-team deal, you can just take somebody in if you want. You can take a salary dump guy that you think fits well with this roster. This is kind of a way outside the box thing, but like, say the honest thing in Miami does happen and Tyler Hero's out there. Like, this allows somebody like that for the Wolves to say, okay, like, let's do it. Like, this gives you more of those opportunities for you to just kind of put yourself in those races, and maybe solicit some multi-team deals and kind of be the shoulder to cry on.
Yeah, and it'll come down to, like, my initial reaction when I saw it was, wow, I'm surprised they didn't even get anything back. And they swapped the 28 for 33rd overall picks, and I think you could argue that 33 is more valuable than 28, because 28 you have to give someone a full-time contract, and 33 you can give them like a two-way deal, basically what Rocco Zikarsky is on, and then you can give them a full deal, and then they're a restricted free agent, so you just get like all these years of team control for a 33rd pick, and is whatever guy you wanted at 28, fairly solid chance they'll be there at 33. I will add to that the Wolves, for the to basically salary dump Mike Conley, they moved down from 22 to 28 to do that. That saved the ownership money. It also got them under the first apron, which allowed the Ayo Dosunmu trade to be more easy, and you have Julian Phillips on this roster because of that. So all that stuff. But
then we don't know Julian Phillips' news if that doesn't happen. Just throwing that out there.
And that's the true tragedy. So I was surprised that they didn't get anything back, but I think if maybe if they could have gotten like a heavily protected first from another team, or maybe you get back second round picks from like you get an extra second round pick or something. But I think in all those trades, you're almost certainly taking back some sort of salary in the deal, the salary that you can't cut, like they cut Mohamed Gay. And so I think they valued taking back absolutely zero salary, and thinking about that longer, I think that makes sense, because now, like all the trading, all that stuff we talked about, like there'll be that missing value that they didn't get for trading Julius Randle to X team. I think they'll be able to make up that using the cap flexibility. They'll be able to make that up. So I think that's fine. It's just, I mean, I already talked about, it's just like the big picture stuff of like, they're just missing like really top end talent at the top of the roster. But again, that was true with Randle on the roster. But let's take a look at, let's actually, for at least this next season, let's take a look at what the Wolves do have. So they really, I mean, in my eyes, they only have 4 guys on the roster right this second that I'm like, okay, those are for sure guys that will play and play heavy minutes and play every night. So they have Anthony Edwards. He's pretty good. They got Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, and Naz Reid. Those are your starting 2 through 5 right there. Barring any other trades, those will be your starting 2 through 5 the entire season. Next, and I'm going by top salary down. They have Dante DiVincenzo, who obviously tore his Achilles at the end of the playoffs. For the regular season, you pretty much have to assume he's zero. And personally, without knowing diddly crap about his injury situation, I really think it's going to be tough to count on him for anything in the playoffs either. Look at Tatum. Look at Tatum. I know people point to Tatum and be like, hey, look, he did come back. And I would point to him, yeah, and then he got hurt. Like, I just really don't think you're going to be able to count on much from Dante there. I'm not saying that means you have to trade him because his salary expiring on your books holds value in and of itself because you can re-sign him far more easily. But beyond that,
lesser salary than what he was already making. I mean, if they wanted to lock him down on 2 years at $9 per or something like that, that's another.
Yeah, it'll probably be more raw money, but a smaller percentage of the cap because the cap goes up.
Yep.
But I mean, you're just not gonna be able to pay him even coming off an Achilles less than $12.5 million. But after that, they only have 2 more guys fully on the contract with the Joan Berenger and Terrence Shannon Jr., which I think fair to put them in a similar bucket of those guys will play. I'd imagine those guys will be your somewhere between their 7th through 10th man on this roster. And then you have Julian Phillips. He has a team option, so if they don't like him, they'll let him go. I think they'll pick that up.
I would imagine.
I mean, it's the league minimum is basically the same number. So if I don't know.
I mean, who's your better guy that you're going to get at $2.5 million at this point?
I don't know. I know so little about Julian Phillips, and other than he seems like a nice enough guy walking past him half a dozen times. So that's where you're at. You really only have 8 players on the roster. Now, again, by the time you're listening, they'll probably have Ayo Dosunmu on this roster. I would probably, in my head, pencil him down as 6th man. Obviously, there'd be plenty of nights he starts if X player's out, all that stuff. But I would pencil in Ayo. I don't know what he'll get. Starting salary of like $15.5 million that goes up every year, something like that. So there's your 5th rotation player, and then like you said, we got Berenger and Shannon as your kind of fringe, likely playing, but maybe not every night. And so that leaves to me the biggest hole. Like if you're just ignoring they need a star thing, like they need a point guard. I think that's been very clear. That could be a mid-level exception type of player that you start and doesn't always close for you. I think that'd be fine. The trade exception, if we're looking at, I think the De'Aaron Fox, if you wanted to try to go get him, if that makes sense, or if the Spurs are looking into that. It sounds like John Morant is not in the cards, but name your point guard. Like that is the biggest hole. And then just general depth from players that have more experience. But again, we talked about these trade exceptions that they have. So they'll be able to, if there was worry about depth before this, I think that that'll be filled. My questions are just point guard, which again, not going to judge them for not having a point guard, months before the season. We'll see how that takes time. But like, again, my biggest thing is like, I think for this team to get back, or even just to get there in the first place, to like being a true 1A championship contender, they need to take, and it doesn't leave the star thing, they need to take one more big asset swing. They need to add whatever player that everyone goes and, okay, now they're as good as XYZ team, they're going to fight. And if they make that trade this summer, I think this trade makes that deal more possible. If they don't, I think that's fine too. And it gives you're going to know in 12 months from now, you're going to know what you have in Jaden McDaniels. You're going to know what you have in Naz Reid. And that's going to be just as important. The team is still going to be really good. The team, if they get their heads out of their like they'll win more regular season games just by Ant, Jaden, and Naz getting better, Rudy, so all that stuff. Like they'll still be able to win playoffs here. Like I don't worry about Ant being frustrated by the team state on this. He's not going to request a trade. I really don't think that's possible. I don't know if he'll accept the extension offer next summer because like he can make more this summer. I don't know. I'm not looking at we're at this summer, not next summer. So I think what I'm just curious on, do they find that big swing they want to take? Is it worth it to take this summer, or do they kind of go with a similar level of roster from last year, just a better fitting roster that allows them to stay at the same level they were the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the latter. And I guess the last thing I would say is just I think they're going to get an equivalent of Julius in a salary dump type of guy that just hopefully fits better with this roster and is more and would just be a better positional fit. I would go back and look at Dejounte Murray. Like if you can get good quality starting point guard Dejounte Murray who averages 15, 16 points a game, is a is about a 35%, 36% 3-point shooter, good from the mid-range, lengthy, can defend, gets out and runs. Yeah.
Ayo Dosunmu signs a 5-year, $112 million contract with the Minnesota Timberwolves. So
there it is.
Like I said, by the time you're listening, not even that. By the time we finish the recording, I would assume we're back with the Timberwolves. But please finish your point, and then we'll move on to Ayo.
20 a year would come in at.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah, it's a big commitment. But they like him. But it's also less than 20 million a year. If Ayo's at 15 points a game ish next year, that makes your money back for sure. But that's my point about Dejounte Murray. Is it's like, that's kind of the Julius equivalent at point guard, like someone who doesn't really seem to fit in New Orleans and could be looking for a new place. And if you get not necessarily Spurs Murray, but like maybe even just like a half measure below that, that is the type of player that brings this team to a contention status. Like I do think that. Like I think this team has enough talent, has enough length, and would have enough of an identity at that point defensively and being able to get out and run in transition where, oh my gosh, you're exploding.
Milwaukee Bucks are trading franchise icon Giannis Antetokounmpo and Bobby Portis. I feel like the franchise icon is for Bobby Portis, not Giannis.
Yeah,
that'd be
that's fair.
Funny. To the Miami Heat for their crap offer of that's my
it's the Heat.
Shamsin say that part.
It's the Heat.
Tyler Hero, Khalil Ware, Jaime Jaquez, Yakishonis, not going to show the first name. 3 first-round picks, including the number 13 pick, a pick swap, and a second rounder. So sorry again, I'm interrupting you.
No, you're good. So, it's all together. Here we go. Right? I mean that's the domino that falls. And so
I don't think the Randle domino like the coincidence on that one, but yeah.
you think the Heat were waiting, or the Bucks were waiting to make their decision until they figured out where Julius Randle was going?
Yeah, I doubt it.
And the East is really going to be a gauntlet next year with Giannis and Julius. But
before we go back to the Wolves, I got to do my Heat. This is one. The Wolves could beat this offer. Maybe Tyler Hero has a lot more value than I know about, but like, I get like Khalil, it's a lot. They got a lot. Maybe they can't. I don't know. This seems like just
Celtics beat that offer.
This seems like
Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, but maybe the Bucks didn't.
They don't own their pick.
3 first-round picks is nice. 13 in this draft is a better that. In this draft, 13 isn't nothing.
Unless the Bucks,
I don't know what the Heat.
Unless the Bucks want to suck so bad that they put their pick in the relegation zone. I mean, that's a possibility.
Yeah, well, and that was, I don't know if Portland wanted to. The best thing about Portland was interested in Jaylen Brown, so like that was, I think my guess is maybe that's where the Boston deal fell apart. Is Portland didn't go through with Jaylen Brown for the Bucks picks, where if Portland was into that, then it makes a lot of sense for the Bucks to go with the Celtics offer. I mean, if the Wolves weren't going to get Giannis, which they said Jaden was untouchable, they were never going to happen. they weren't really in on it. I don't know how the Heat, how is this? I mean, I think the Heat are probably better run organization than the Bucks, and they'll be able to find better roster people. But I don't know. The Bucks just seemed like a not much better version of or the Heat just seems like a not much better version of the Bucks at this point.
Yeah, well, and the Bucks, how are the Heat going to space the floor next year? Like, what do they actually have right now that could tell you, yeah, they're going to be effective enough spacing the floor that they're going to be able to come out of the East. I don't think they're going to.
But look, I think it makes sense for them just because I don't know what else they were doing.
Well, right.
So, might as well.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm just saying, I don't know. I just still see a super flawed roster.
Do you think the Wolves could have I actually, looking at it, I don't know enough about Jonas or Hawkes is a solid enough role player.
He's a six-man
Kalel Ware is a solid enough young player. I think Hero is the big thing. I just don't have much value in my head of Hero. If they can flip Hero into multiple firsts, or if they can get Hero playing well enough and they trade him later, then that makes sense. 3 first-round picks is better than the Wolves could. I just think if the Wolves really wanted to offer Jade and Naz in their 2030, I think that was better than what the Heat offered. I don't think the Wolves were really ever interested in that. My question would have been, what's a better offer? What the Heat gave, or Jaden plus 2 first-round picks if you don't make the Rob Blunder trade. And even then, I don't know if the Wolves would really want to do that. They're not as desperate as this Heat team, and I think that'd be the thing is the Wolves just wouldn't be as desperate. And with Giannis's contract status, you just have to be 100% sure he wants to be where he's landing, and the Heat have that. And I don't know if the Wolves would have. So
and he doesn't. I think he hasn't.
I know I'm bringing it up, but I think we can close the Giannis. I mean, obviously he got traded, but I don't think there's much consternation for the Wolves not being able to swing this.
Well, and he's not. Again, plenty is said about his health. I think that's very fair too at this point in his career with his age and where he's at.
I think it's a little overblown too, though, to a certain extent. But I think Wolves Twitter has been underrating Giannis 50 point in a closeout finals game at Antetokounmpo.
No question. Yes, but that was also however many years ago. My only question here is the decision making process. It's one of the sub points that we brought up, but it's you're blowing up your entire team. You're bringing in a guy who, again, plays X amount of games per year for what you're going to be paying him. And you're going to be making that trade knowing that you never, ever tried the Ant, Jaden, Naz thing. You just never did it. You never even tried it. The core that fans kind of had in mind that would be the future of this team dating back 3-4 years ago, you never even gave that a shot. I think that would be one of the things that, if the trade worked out, we're attending a parade on Hennepin Avenue. But if it doesn't, that is going to be one of the things that sticks for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, and taking almost Giannis specifically out of it, I don't think the Wolves are in the point in their arc where they need to make a last ditch trade. And to a certain extent, I think that would be unfair to call Giannis that, but it would, like you mentioned, be a really big swing that could end with the title and could end with both guys on different teams in 3 years.
I don't think it would be that unfair to equate it to the Dame trade that Milwaukee made.
Yeah, obviously that just undersells how good Giannis is. And I went through the history of the league, man, and guys as good as 2 guys on the same team as good as Giannis and Ant, they just win the title. They win it every single damn time. And so that would be my biggest thing. But again, I don't think the Wolves, they were never close. So I don't know. I don't think it's a thing to harp on. But
the equivalent to the Dame trade that I'm making though is it's by making that trade, there is no other option for you later on. There's no pivot out of it. You are locked in, and this only ends with either a championship or both Giannis and Ant no longer being Timberwolves. That's the parallel that I'm making with the Dame trade and a possible
for sure.
Giannis trade for the Timberwolves. That's it.
And the Wolves aren't. The Wolves have too much value on their books. They have too many good players. They'll be able to put. And I think you agree, they're not at this point in their
correct
their arc yet.
No question.
And maybe in X number of years they will be. I think it makes sense to put together a team. Unless Giannis, I think the Bucks did as well. if Giannis, I always felt like this, and I think it proved true. If Giannis is going to end up a Wolf, it was going to be because Giannis said, I want to be traded there and basically only there. And that never really happened, which it was never likely to. And if that would have happened, then the Wolves could have gotten him on a cheap trade where you're like, it's like Jaden straight up or Jaden and Dante post injury straight up or whatever. So I think that's kind of where that ends. And that's probably good that the Wolves, at least now, seem like they're more going with the let's retool around our best players, our youngest players, our core, and win a trade that makes sense for us to jump into the new stratosphere of our team, we can make it. But because of the Giannis trade, we got sidetracked. Let's look at this Ayo Dosunmu contract, which he did get more. He got a kind of a lot more than what I would have previously thought. And it's not to say he's not worth it, but I think there was kind of this belief that he would get squeezed a little bit because there aren't many teams with cap space. And so I am surprised that the Wolves weren't able to get him on a slightly cheaper deal. Maybe it wasn't worth it. Maybe it's not worth it to try to squeeze the guy that you're hoping will be on your team for 5 straight years, for an extra couple $1 million. Like the amount I'm thinking is like $4 million a year. It's like, so what? So maybe it's not worth it. And maybe just that extra $4 million a year, maybe they projected, oh, maybe this team can put together this offer. Maybe this team can put together this offer for him. So let's just lock it down and we can move on from there. But I put in my spreadsheet like $18 million a year, and the starting Jack Borman has it. I think he's got this right. 8% annual raises, which will kind of outpace the cap because it sounds like 6% cap raises every year. So, but I mean, that's fine. You'd imagine Iowa will keep getting better. So it starts at $19.1 million and gets as high as a $26 million player option in year 5, which again, for my spreadsheet nerdum, yay, I get to extend out my spreadsheet a year. Ayo Dosunmu is the first Timberwolves player that has any sort of contract number on 2030, 2031. So that's a long way out. He's the only the year before in 29-30, Naz Reid has a player option. So Ayo Dosunmu is the first fully guaranteed contract in 2030. So more spreadsheet fun. I'll get my new updated spreadsheet sent out post haste, as the old people say. But what do you think about just Ayo's contract, both whether he's worth it, which I'm guessing yes, but just maybe the thought of trying to, like, could the Wolves have tried to squeeze him out of a few less millions?
It's high, but it's tradable eventually. And I only say that after he signed it because it's like, he's inevitably going to be in a trade conversation within 5 years at some point in time. Anybody on this roster probably is going to be, let's be honest. It is a little bit high, especially from kind of what you saw out of him later on in the playoffs. He had his it was a game 5 against Denver, I think is what it was. Game 5 with the 43 points. It was game 4 or game 5?
4.
4. He had his game 4 with 43 points. That was kind of a signature moment that I think probably got him this specific contract. But he also is an invaluable piece. I mean, whether it was the triple-double in Dallas, or just what he brought from an effort standpoint and his ability to play with force and transition. Like, he became a crucial piece of this team down the stretch and gave them a bench presence that was so needed. And now, let's face it, this team needs a sixth man. Now that Naz Reid is your promoted starting 4, this team needs a sixth man. And they've got their sixth man for most of the time less than what they were paying Naz. So, it's the natural order of things, right? It's develop and promote, develop and promote, develop and promote. And I mean, you I guess, quote unquote, developed Ayo Dosunmu for half a season. He's been developing with Chicago for all of this time, but your idea is internal development and promotion. You've done that now with Naz Reid. You're banking on it with Jaden McDaniels. And now you're hoping that can happen now with Ayo Dosunmu and hopefully becoming a Sixth Man of the Year candidate at that chunk of change. So, frankly, like, if you're a Timberwolves fan, like if you're a true fan of the team over the last 10 years, Like, this is the natural cadence of things that you would want. This team now is going to be carried by players that were mostly drafted, but all developed by this team. Like, the development of this roster over the next 2-3 years, like the success of this roster is going to be almost solely in player development. You have Yohan Berenjay, who's going to be coming up and grabbing a bigger piece of the minutes pie. You have Ayo Dosunmu, who's now going to be playing a bigger role. Terrence Shannon will almost certainly be playing a bigger role next year. He'll be I would imagine, somewhat touching 20 minutes a game next year. And you got Ant and Nas. And so, the way I look at it, like, over half your rotation now is going to be based on internal development. And so what do you do with that? That's the big thing I'll be watching. But just overall from Ayo, yeah, I do think that number is maybe a little bit high, but you got to make it worth it now. And that's the price you have to pay if you want a premium sixth man in this league, I think. He just has to now be that.
Yeah, I mean, look, he makes $4 million less than Nas Reed and about $7 million less than Jaden McDaniels. So, like, that's the amount they believe in him. What was it, the 8 starters a few years ago? Like, Ayo's in whatever theoretical group that is. And I think during the playoffs, you saw enough from him to be confident in this number. I think this is just a good deal. And like you said, what it's worth. And if this is true for everyone on the roster, now you got to make it work. You got to make, for X number of years, you got to make Ayo Dosunmu work on this team. And you can't let the playoffs or his time with Minnesota be a flash in the pan. And again, that's not to say that is that all the expectations. Like, the expectation it will be that he'll continue to grow on this roster. But yeah, now with Ayo signed, let's go back to my almighty spreadsheet. The Wolves are, again, I'm gonna treat the first apron as our salary cap here. The Wolves are now $31 million and change below the first apron, with at least 5 roster spots to sign. Again, the Wolves have a $15 million mid-level. If they use all of that, they'll be close to, with extra minimums on that, they'll only have about like $10 million left to spend. They have that biannual exception, so they could use those 2 main exceptions and just sign those guys plus minimums, whether that be, I don't know if Mike Conley is planning to stay, or if Mike Conley wants to be in Minnesota, I would imagine Mike on the minimum would make a lot of sense for the Wolves. Probably same with Kyle Anderson.
Bones maybe too.
Bones on
somewhat of a minimum.
And a minimum, maybe give him a couple $100,000 more if you feel like it. It won't cost you that.
He didn't play in the Spurs
the cash
series.
isn't ever the. Yeah, but I think you need guys like that though. I
agree.
You need just roster depth. I would have no problem giving Bones like a $3 million 1 year or a 2 year. If you can get like a 2 year 6, or like you give him a player option to, like, something like that. So you could re-sign some form of. I should probably take Ayo Dosunmu unrestricted free agent off my spreadsheet here. So yeah, you have Jalen Clark as a restricted free agent. No earthly idea what his market could be. You could bring him back at, again, restricted means you can match whatever offer he gets on the open market. I would imagine that'll be, go tell Jalen, let us know what people say. And if you get more than what we want to, if you get more than what we want to give you, then congrats, good for you. And if you don't, welcome back. I'd imagine that'll be the stance with Clark. But again, they still have $31 million of first apron space to play around with. That leaves a lot to fill in a starting point guard, which I think in the immediate short term is the biggest need. And once they do that, they can either fill around with depth or maybe start poking around at a bigger trade or something.
Yeah, I think the minimum market's going to be really interesting. Chris Finch loves his scrap heap guards, man. He loves a guard that he can bring in, break down their game a little bit, find 2 or 3 things they do well, and just let them run with that. So I think the minimum market will be pretty interesting. Man, I just have a hard time thinking, like, you laid out an option where they could essentially add like 3 or 4 more players with the space that they have left. I just have such a hard time seeing that. I really do think that this is going to be a situation where they try and, I mean, they have $31 million left till that first apron. I think that they probably try and use all of that in one foul swoop. We'll see what that ends up being. I have a hard time seeing them adding, three guys or something like that with that remaining space.
Yeah, for sure. And I think because I think you between Mike, Bones, Kyle, if some form of those players, if they're back on the minimum, I think you can kind of trust, not to the level of like I think the Wolves need a starting point guard, and I would probably say they need like a seventh man behind Ayo. We're like, okay, we're really confident in maybe like a backup center would be good.
I think a rotation center
behind Broody. Not even someone that has to play every night or whatever, but just like, do we really want to trust a 20-year-old Johan Berenger to play all 20, all 18 of the non-Rudy minutes? Or you could go small. You could play Jaden at center now, a little bit more Nas at center with or not even like a Nas at quote unquote center, but like Jaden's like the low man, the defensive center, where Nas is still playing like functionally power forward or whatever. I'm interested to see what they're able to do. I'm interested to see if there's a good chance that like tomorrow this was their tomorrow. Like there's not much to see tomorrow. We'll see what they're kind of in a similar position where they were a year ago, where they don't have the exact first pick of the second round, but they have the fourth pick of the second, or the third pick of the second round. Does that have value in a trade? Do you want to pick someone there? Do you want to split that up into a future second, 2 future seconds if it's worth it? I don't know. That all those little things are fun to think about, but for tonight, it's a Julius Randle trade, and I think the Julius Randle trade makes even more sense now that we see Ayo's number coming in a few $1 million more. It's not that they couldn't have afforded. Well, honestly, yeah, this $19 million would have, if they would have kept everyone, and that was never likely, but if they would have kept everyone, this Ayo contract number would have had them bumping right up against the second apron. They wouldn't have been able to really add much else on the margins, and obviously they were never going to run back last year's team. They made that clear at Exit Media a month ago. But yeah, it does make a little bit more sense now. And like I said off the top, this is not a trade you're going to be able to judge harshly or lavish it with praise right now. But if they make XYZ move, that's either good or bad. I think that every range of conclusion is possible, and I'm looking forward to see what they do. And at the very least, this roster makes a lot more sense now that it did. Just harp on it again. The Wolves, to get back to do what the Knicks just did, I think the Wolves are one big swing move away. But that was true. That was true 12 hours ago. So it is what it is.
Not much changes, man. Except it's going to happen here probably over the next maybe 48 hours. Yeah, I agree with you. I think this roster makes more sense. It does. You at least see some sort of a plan there. And I'll just continue. I'll kind of bring this one home with the point I was making is, Ant's got his guys now, man. Like, it's not, and not saying that he didn't before, but he has, the two guys that are going to be his running mates next year, Nas and Jaden, the guys that he essentially came here with, the guys that he started his career with, who he's developed friendships with, who he fits the best with out on the floor. Let's be honest, like every time he was out there with Nas, everyone, even before Rudy and that 21-22 team, like the chemistry that Ant had with Nas out on the floor was just unmistakable. And it kind of felt like he knew where Nas was going to be at all times. Like he was clearly his best pick and roll and pick and pop partner. He trusts Nas inherently. And so that it's the three amigos now. It's three musketeers. Like it's their show, and this is their team moving forward. And so there is that bit of clarity for fans to hold on to. Rudy Gobert maybe takes a half step down in terms of his role. Still, obviously, extremely integral and important. We'll see what kind of physical shape he is able to come back in this year. But it's their team now, and it is going to be it's going to be a trial on internal development this year, and how well the Wolves are able to do that. It will take them as far or as short as they allow it to.
Yep, Co-sign that, and yeah, it'll be fun at the very least next year. Like you mentioned, Ant, Jaden, and Nas. That's your core. Obviously, it'll be fun to see if that's good enough, or if it's not good enough, if those guys fit, or if they don't. But that's the biggest thing. And maybe it should have. We can complain about it. Should have happened sooner, and maybe it shouldn't have. Maybe it whatever. I kind of tend to believe they've had a lot of plays. They had a lot of playoff success with Julius Randle. They won 3 playoff series with that guy. How long ago, before Julius Randle came to this team, would we have been starving in the wilderness for 3 playoff wins in 2 seasons? It was literally 11 months before that trade happened. Not even. I mean, what is the distance of time between the first playoff series win of this era, the Phoenix Suns sweep, and the Julius Randle trade? 2 months?
Yeah.
Yep. I think, and this is a good thing, we've been spoiled. Not even they haven't even made a finals yet. God willing, they get there. We've become incredibly spoiled by this team, I think, and that's, again, a good thing. And we're all, team included, players included, searching for more than what they've done. But I to kind of give a bow, I think it was time to move on from Julius Randle, and the not being able to play Jaden and Nas stuff had a lot less to do with Jaden, or wasn't Julius's fault. But ultimately, it's the business. It is what it is. Julius Randle is going back to New York City for better or for worse. I like it there. I was there a couple weeks ago. Man. I enjoy this. I enjoy the city, although I was partying it up with the Knicks fans. That makes it easier. But yeah, it was probably just time to move on from Julius Randle, and it's kind of a nothing. I mean, I'm sure the Wolves' title odds are more or less unchanged from where they were before this trade. Their theoretical chances to win a title in the next 5 years is pretty much the same. But I think this is a good step forward for the Wolves, and I'm really excited to see what they do to finish out this offseason. Hopefully it's not just simple. I mean, maybe, I know we talked about a Gobert trade, but that would be if they were going to make one more splash, to me, that would be the one left. The one thing left would be if they do want to look to trade Rudy Gobert and really shake up this roster. But the difference is, you can't just salary. I mean, you could, but you can't just salary. You can let go of Julius and his 21 points per game and everything else he brought and replace it. If you trade Rudy, you need to bring back a player of a similar skill set to replace that trade just becomes infinitely more difficult. But ultimately, he's in a similar point as you can't just let Rudy go there as a player option next year. You can't just let Rudy decline that and walk to a different team next year, just from an asset standpoint. So that's where the Wolves are at. For this podcast, the Ayo domino was the biggest thing. I don't know what we're gonna do. I think, just kind of spitballing here, if the Wolves don't make any major trades, if they have the 33rd pick and the 59th pick on Wednesday, no longer have a first round pick. If they just make those picks, I'll probably have someone else back on next week, as we covered most of the Wolves topics. If they make another sizable trade or another signing, I will find someone else to come on and talk about that. But at the very least, next week we will have another podcast for you. But Andrew, anything else you got on the Wolves situation, and or anything you want to plug about your Wolves coverage?
Well, once all this madness settles a little bit, I'm going to write something about it. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I think maybe we'll have some clarity here again in the next 48 hours. But I want to write a little bit about something, and I do kind of get the sense that the tone that's taking shape, the thing that keeps coming back into my head is going to be this story of Ant, Jaden, and Nas. It keeps coming back in my head. It keeps circling a little bit more. So I'll probably end up writing something about that, but more so just kind of a dust settling piece, because in an off season that we were told that there were going to be plenty of moves that were going to be made. This roster was not going to be the same. That is starting to take shape. It'll certainly happen, but in terms of plugging, I'll be putting some out here pretty soon about that. It's the NBA off season, man. Who knows at this point? I might write 4 or 5 different things. Scrap all of them.
Absolutely. Same applies to me. And tomorrow night, us in the media, or myself in the media, will be talking to Tim Connolly. Unless that, who knows if that changes with the trades. I probably not. And then Timberwolves GM Matt Lloyd on Wednesday night. So I will certainly be writing on something regarding that. So check out both Andrew and I on Canis Hoopus, as well as this podcast. Yeah, thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next week. Go Wolves.
Ayo